Hey, welcome back, everybody. Of course, this is Dr. Keith McNally, and this is the Question Guy podcast. I want to get this right. I am with Noemi Barris. Yes? And she has a great story for us. Now, this story started when she was younger. And so this is going to be really interesting and very specific to people have been as an exchange student. So this is kind of where the story starts, but I don't want to interrupt any part of this. I want to get right into the conversation. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me in conversation. How are you this morning?
I'm very well. Thank you, Keith, for having me on your show today.
You're very welcome. And so, where do you want to get started? So, this is a great story that you have, which I was inspired. I was never an exchange student. I grew up in Philadelphia, so that was not the thing. I didn't even know that that kind of thing existed at all. But this is your story. So, let's talk about how it began and how it has really transformed you into the person that you are today.
So, long story. Let's start when so I was born and raised in Hungary. That was a very small town. And I didn't know anything about being an exchange student either. That was like a very new thing to me and to my parents. But I lived in this town and it was small and with kind of a, narrow-minded community. And I didn't really fit in. I was bullied at school because I was always the nerd. I was the one who learned a lot, and I always loved reading. So, I was just kind of a lonely child there. And yeah, that's true. And I was an only child in my family too. So, when you're an only child, you are your best friend, and
Oh
you
yeah,
have
yeah, yeah,
to
yeah.
figure out your life. So actually, being an exchange student and this whole experience was thanks to my late dad, because he got together with someone when we were at like a language exam or something I did in the capital in Budapest, and he met a lady whose daughter was an exchange student with the AFS, is the American Field Service.
Okay.
And so it was, wow, it sounded so great. And my dad told me, it's like, why didn't you try it? And my mom was really angry with him because I'm the only child. I'm 16. And, it's like, why did you find something like this for a girl? And she has to, move to a different country for a whole year, not to see her and, not to meet her. So, but anyway, long story short, I made up my mind and I told my parents, okay, let's do it. And I want to be an exchange student. So I had two choices. I either could travel to Canada or Denmark. And so my mom told me, so, okay, I'm fine with Denmark, but you're not traveling to Canada for a whole year. So that's how I ended up in this beautiful Scandinavian country and, and started my life as an exchange student. It was
So
quite
it was
yeah.
like on your 16th birthday, it was like time to get going, or how did that all come about?
No, actually, that was no, I was already 16. So
Okay.
I was already 16 back then. And no, I just, we filled out all the applications form and, we were just waiting for the reply. They accepted me. They had
Well,
kind of an exam
about
as well or
can you
something.
talk about that? What would be the requirements to be an exchange? I never even thought about that. I thought it was, you pay somebody some money and poof, you're on a plane. Um, what did you have to, what was the application process like?
I think it's different from country to country because
Well,
I
for you?
remember, yeah, for me in Hungary, it was like you had to have some kind of like a preparation or exam that you have to go through, and you had to speak English in order to get to another country. So that was the common language because obviously I didn't speak Danish back then, but I spoke English. So they had like kind of language test and some kind of tests or how you interact with people and just kind of like psychological tests and stuff that you can cope with being away for a whole year, because we have
Yeah.
to remember that back then in 1996 97 we didn't have internet, we didn't have like mobile phones, we didn't have anything, so there was no contact with your friends, family, and it's quite an experience to be away from everyone that you know in your whole life.
Yeah. And that had to be scary to think about it, probably from your perspective. And I'm a dad, and so I know from your parents' perspective, I'm not going to see my daughter for a year. Now, we may be able to make long distance phone calls, and they could be expensive at times, especially back in the 90s.
Yeah.
But day in and day out, not seeing your daughter. But you made it work, and you made it work in a very positive way. So let's go into and talk about that. What was that experience like?
I mean, first of all, you had to live with a Danish family, and you had like a Danish sister, a Danish parents, and everything. And it's strange because obviously they are not your parents and they're not your brothers or sisters, but you have to fit in, and it's not always easy. And I'm not going to tell you that was like a whole 100% positive experience for me with living in a family. So like I didn't have that kind of relationship with everyone in the family. So yeah, let's put it that way. But it was brilliant. And the other thing that I could like join like a class in a high school with full of Danish people, Danish students, and they were really welcoming, and it was a great team, and they supported me all along the way. And yeah, it was really, really positive how they accepted me into the class. And I was the only one there as an exchange student, because we had a couple of exchange students in the school, but they always put just only one in one class, so we could learn the language. So we didn't speak in English with each other, so we had to practice Danish from scratch. So you end up in a class, and the first day you had to introduce yourself, and everybody's talking in Danish, but obviously they had good English as well, so they helped me with that too. But yeah, it was quite an experience, and quite scary, especially at the beginning when you just woke
Yeah.
up there. It's like she's the new kid, and yeah, but they made it so easy for me to fit in.
So there's a lot of how I would put this, expectations by, the accepting family and the accepting school. Like, do they always hold you to an expectation, or do they try to pull you in and kind of give you the immersive experience that, this is your family for a year. This is how we do things, and the schools are different throughout the countries, and so different expectations there. Were there levels of expectation placed upon you as an exchange student?
Yeah, the expectation part was a bit tricky with my host family, because they had an exchange student before me, and she was an older girl from the US. So like, when they noticed that my accent is not American and I'm not American, I'm from Central Europe. So it was a bit tricky because their expectation was like different, and they wanted something different. So that's how we clashed a bit, because I was a different person.
Right.
So yeah, but obviously they had all these strange expectations, not the school and not the kids and not my friends in Denmark, but specifically this family. They did have kind of a strange expectation towards me.
So
Yeah.
how did they help you become part of who they were? So there has to be this compromise, give and take. There has to be this, acceptance of who you are eventually, because it would have been a really awkward 12 months for them to hold you to an expectation that wasn't realistic.
Yeah, I was part of every kind of family get-togethers and all these parties they are having, and Danish people especially, they love having parties. But the parties are like that in a family, that they're sitting there for hours, they're eating, they're smoking, they're drinking, and you have to stay there. And it's like a 16 years old. It's like, okay, let's get over with it. But I was part of the family, so everybody knew me. And when it was Christmas or my birthday or anything, they always brought me gifts. And yeah, we went on trips, and I was part of the family, so they accepted me as part of their family, like
Good.
more or less. Yeah.
So talk to me about how did this become a transformational part of your life? So where does that all come into play?
Yes. So that's a great question. So I was a very shy girl growing up in this small town, and like flying or going just traveling to Denmark from Hungary is like, that was the first time I sat on a plane. I was 16. So
Yeah.
that was a big deal for me. And it's like, wow, this is so cool. And you just experience freedom. It's away from your parents, away from that small town. And then you just broke out of your shell, and you just step by step you became some kind of an independent personality, and you experienced so much, and your self-confidence just like boosted. And you were I could feel that I was changing the way I behaved, the way I held myself. yeah, it's a strange transformation you go through. And I remember I was doing journaling back then in Denmark. It's like, yeah, obviously didn't have any computer or anything. You just wrote it down. Excuse me. But I remember I was reading these notes back like a couple of years ago, and it's like, wow, this is so cool. And it was like how I transformed, how I felt, and how I changed. So it was definitely something positive going on, and I became more open, and I had really good relationship with my friends, not like at home, and I wasn't bullied or I felt that okay, this is my place, and I would love to stay here if I could, not with the family
Right.
necessarily, but like going to school there and enjoying that kind of lifestyle that we had. And obviously that was a kind of a bubble if you are an exchange student, because you have all these exchange students friends, and we get together and you party and you have a great relationship with them, but it's definitely changing you in every possible way and in a positive way for sure.
So what did you learn? What did you learn in that 12 months? I'm really curious.
First of all, I learned the language from scratch. So I learned Danish, and
Wow.
so when I got home, I had like a higher exam in Danish. Then I studied Danish linguistics at the university. So it somehow decided who I'm gonna be. So I became a Danish linguist because of Denmark and because I was part of this program. But it's also important that it helped me a lot with my personal growth. You become more independent, adaptable, self-reliant, and you're not timid, shy anymore. You stand up for yourself. And yeah, I had problem with that when when I got back to Hungary and the Hungarian school system, because everybody's like, you change, you act differently, you speak differently, you dress differently. What's going on with you? It's like, I was changing, they didn't. So
Mhm.
I discovered myself. It was the personal growth and like a personal discovery that I went through between age 16 and 17. And I think it really decided that I become the person I am nowadays or today.
S-
But it's also helps you with global awareness, because you figure out that like people out there outside your little bubble and little world where you grow up,
mhm.
and the world is so much bigger than you think, and there are so many interesting people in it that you can have a relationship and friendship with. So it really opened up my world and changed me.
So you said that you learned a different language and then you went on to study that language in college
That was
and became
university,
a
yeah.
go ahead and became a linguist or talk to me about that because that was like the next stage of your transformation.
Yes, true story, because everyone's from my high school class, they went to either doctors, lawyers, like
The
some
standard
kind of,
professionals, yeah.
yeah, the standard professional. And when I told my dad, it's okay, I want to be a linguist, like a Danish. And it's like, why don't you just want to be a doctor or something like reliable and, just to earn money from those professions? And it's like, no, I love the language. And I mean, Denmark is, there's always place, that's an important place in my life, although it's a strange language, but I still love it. And so I made up my mind, and like even our university group, there was like 6, 7 girls there who studied, and that was it. Like no one else, because you didn't need that many Danish speakers, obviously, and Danish linguists in a small country like Hungary.
Right.
But yeah, I made up my mind, and I really enjoyed that time because we could, we learned about Danish history, language, culture, literature, and yeah, so it was fun for sure, and I
So
loved it.
what did you do then after you became this linguist person? You got a real job.
Well, I wouldn't call I wouldn't call it a real job back then. You had two options back then. That was in '98, yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
And you could either like start to work for like a multinational company, and it's like kind of a call center, and they need different speakers, like English, Danish speakers. And I didn't really like that option. And the other option was that I could move abroad and start a life there with the language. So again, there's a transition transformation pattern in my life. So I made the choice and I moved abroad because financially, it didn't really work out for me to stay in Hungary, especially back then,
Right.
because the wages and everything were so low. And then after we became part of the EU, you could travel freely and get a job freely anywhere in Europe. So
So
that
where
was
did
the
you move
next
to?
transition.
Where did you move to?
First, I married young, so I actually moved together with my husband.
Okay.
And first we moved to Denmark, which wasn't that wise decision, because obviously in Denmark, everyone speaks Danish. And so, yeah. And because that was the very, very beginning of the EU, so you needed to have all kinds of permits to start working. And either you could start like, cleaning jobs and stuff. So that really, I didn't want to do that. So I started to apply for Danish speaking jobs in Ireland. And because Ireland's economy and was booming back then, and they were always looking for different, language speakers, because
Good.
obviously Irish people, they don't really speak any other languages than English. So they always need like fresh young workforce from abroad who speak different languages. So that's how I ended up from Denmark in Ireland to work in a call center. But it was different call center than in Hungary, because obviously they paid you better. So it was a good choice for me.
Good.
So yeah.
And so from there, you know at least two languages. Do you know any more languages?
Yeah,
What do you?
obviously I have my mother tongue, which is Hungarian, English, Danish, Swedish. I speak Swedish because I studied Swedish at university as well. That was like my second language, and they're so close to each other, so that's pretty easy. And I understand a bit of Norwegian too because of the other two. And I also learned Spanish, German, French, and I learn Greek with my son right now. So I'm not good at it, but I'm still learning. So.
So what
Yeah.
do you do with this superpower of being a linguist? How is this helping you in the world today?
It definitely helps with communication in any languages, and it also helps me to teach my son to speak different languages, because it's so important, and especially when you're in Europe. And like my son was really upset because he loves learning languages, like learning Spanish and French. I teach him, but he doesn't really want to do it. And I told him, like, one day you're gonna thank me for it. It's like, no, I don't want to do it, but no, just keep on keep on going, just be persistent and consistent, because it will help you. You can go to South America, you can go to France, you can go to anywhere, and you can still use those languages. And yeah, so like communication, teaching my son, and it's good for your brain. So that's a plus.
So with all that, what do you do now? Now we're not going to get into your professional because I would love to have that on a different podcast show. But what do you do as for a job? So what's your profession?
My profession right now is a podcast agent. I'm running a podcast booking agency with my husband. It's called Podcast Connections, and we help entrepreneurs to get on quality podcast shows and help them to share their knowledge. So it's a bit different than being a linguist, but it's still part of. And thanks to my communication skill, I can network a lot. I can talk to people. I can be a guest on podcast shows. So yeah.
For those who are watching and listening, and they're either a parent or they're a young person thinking about being an exchange student, give us some insights, more than what you have, in terms of overcoming that initial fear of immersing yourself into a different culture, into a different family, into a different school. How did you overcome the initial fear, and what would you tell somebody how to do that? How would you tell somebody how to do that?
First of all, it's an experience of a lifetime, and you can't just miss that opportunity, because it gives you so much. And once you have persistence and consistency, you have to just stick out. And there are good days and bad days when you're an exchange student and when you're a teenager, especially when hormones and your mind and everything is just all over the place. But it's definitely worth to try it, because it helps you to figure out your future, and helps you with your self-confidence, and helps you to figure out who you are in the world. Because I just heard an interview with Jay Shetty, I listening to his podcast, and they were talking about that they always help the young people to figure out what kind of job they want to do in their life when they grow up, but they never help them to figure out who they are. before they figuring out the job they want to do. And it's just so important to figure out who you are when you are, 17, 18, before you decide who you want to be as or you want to look for a profession. And like being an exchange student is really, really helps you to figure out who you are in this world. And it will help you to get those jobs later in your life, but it's really important.
I
So
love
yeah.
that. That's really good personal insight. Exposure gives you insight into who you are. Noemi, thank you for joining me on another edition of the Question Guy podcast. For those who are watching and listening, we'll see you next time. Take care.